Here we are, fellow travelers. 1,000 subscribers. I don't know what to say. It was like a week ago when I made that video thanking you guys for just a couple hundred subscribers. I don't know what happened. I don't know where you guys came from. You just kind of snuck up on me. Have you seen my videos? Are you sure you're enjoying what's going on in this channel? But in all seriousness, I'm so thankful for you guys. So thankful for all the conversations that have been going on in the comment sections. I've been having a ton of fun, seeing what people think about all the books that we've been talking about recently. And I figured I should make a video to celebrate this momentous occasion. And I figured I'd do a top 10 since everybody likes top 10s on YouTube. And not only is this going to be a top 10 of my 10 favorite books of all time, but I want it to serve as grounds for an actual discussion. I want you guys to comment in the comment section what your favorite books are. Top 10, top 5, top 3, whatever you feel comfortable putting down there. I am legitimately interested in hearing what you guys are reading, the kind of stuff you really enjoy, the kind of stuff that are your favorites. And I will try to engage as much as possible and read as many of those comments as possible. So go ahead and comment. Let me know what your guys' favorite books are. And I guess we'll go ahead and get started with mine. I'm going to try to get through these fairly quickly. But the first two books on the list are actually books I read fairly recently for the first time, but I did enjoy them just that much. I can see myself coming back to them time and time again in the future. The first one is a book that I only read a couple months ago, but I thought it was absolutely amazing. And it's kind of a controversial pick, but my number 10 spot is going to go to Starship Troopers by Robert A. Heinlein. I know this is a controversy. I am well aware that people do not like Starship Troopers on the internet nowadays. They say it's a proponent of fascism and military authoritarianism, and I can see where they get those ideas, but it's not true. If you'd like to learn more about that kind of subject matter, there is a video by Grammaticus Books. He did a whole video kind of disproving the fascism elements of this book. I'll put a link to his video in the not the comments, but in the description somewhere. He definitely deserves the views. Grammaticus is awesome. He's a big inspiration to me. I don't think I'd be doing this YouTube channel if it wasn't for him. But yeah, Starship Troopers is a lot of fun for me, at least. I could kind of detach myself from the whole political angle and just view it as this really fascinating, dark future SF world that is in ways very similar to ours, but in other ways very, very different. And so I enjoyed all of the philosophical and political discussions just as much as I enjoyed the big explosive space battles with the alien bugs. So number 10, Starship Troopers. Number 9 is a book that I read last winter, but it has a very special place in my heart. That is The Last Kingdom by Bernard Cornwell, first book in the Last Kingdom series. I love the BBC Netflix TV show The Last Kingdom, which is based on these books. It was something that my family and I bonded over, and that whole story with all the characters, Uhtred, son of Uhtred, and his friends, they have a special place in my heart. So reading this book made me fall in love with those characters and that storyline all over again. This really great coming-of-age story set in the Viking invasions of England. One of my favorite time periods to read about and to learn more about. So, yeah, it's a fantastic adventure with lots of action and warfare and these real-life historical battles that the main character gets to take part in. But I highly recommend. I know there's a bunch of different books in the series, but I'm just going to say that that's going to be my favorite, no matter what. I have yet to get to them, but I'm just going to throw it out there. I think The Last Kingdom is going to be my favorite because I love that original storyline from the TV show, and I don't think anything can top it. Next, I had to put one of the Dresden Files books on this list. Dresden Files is probably my favorite modern fantasy series. Jim Butcher is just a fantastic writer, and all of the books in that series are just awesome. It was really hard to pick a favorite, but in the end, I went with Proven Guilty. So number 8 is Proven Guilty by Jim Butcher. My favorite characters in all of the Dresden Files series, besides Harry Dresden himself, are the Carpenter family. I love that family so much. I love their whole dynamic. I love Michael and Charity and Molly and all the kids. They're a ton of fun to read about. They get some really good character development in this story, especially Molly. Harry gets some good character development as well. The comedy with Harry is cranked up to 10 in this book. He has some really great one-liners. There's one line that he has during the final battle at the end where, if you've read this book, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It's one of the most epic moments in the whole series. And the plot is really interesting as well. The whole mystery in this book is about movie monsters coming to life and killing people, which I'm a big fan of horror movies and movie monsters, so that really spoke to me. That plot in particular really struck a chord with me. So that's what kind of pushed it above all the other Dresden Files books. But if I could put the whole series on this list, I would. Number 7 is a childhood favorite of mine, and that is The Book of Three by Lloyd Alexander. This is the first book in the Chronicles of Prydain series. Really great kids' fantasy series. I had the second book, The Black Cauldron, as a kid, but I never read that one for whatever reason. Just recently, I actually bought all the other books, and I read through them all in one go. Fell in love with this book all over again, fell in love with the rest of the series. And I don't want to talk about it too much, because I do plan on doing a whole review of the Prydain series sometime in the near future, so keep an eye out for that one. But for now, I will say that it is this fantastic kids series with a lot of kind of dark elements that I don't think would be published in kids fantasy nowadays, but I don't know, I think kids can handle it. I could handle it when I was a kid. Then again, I did like a lot of dark, twisted stuff when I was a kid, so who knows. Number 6 is a translation of a Japanese novel, and that is All You Need Is Kill by Hiroshi Sakurazaka. I believe that's how that name is pronounced. Not entirely sure. My only exposure to the Japanese language is from video games and anime, so you'll have to forgive me if I pronounce that incorrectly. But it's a really great military SF novel about a future where the world is under attack from these aliens called mimics. The various nations of the Earth organize themselves into one united military that pushes back against these mimics. They're kind of fighting a losing battle, though. The main character is a Japanese soldier named Keiji, who, during his first battle, is just killed immediately. A mimic impales him on this giant spike right through the chest, kills him immediately, and then he wakes up in his bed back at the bunkhouse, and it's the day before the invasion. And he finds out pretty quick that he is stuck in this weird time loop, where every time he dies, time reverses and he reverts back to the day before the battle. And he uses this experience to learn more about the mimics. Every time he lives a life and dies, he learns more and more about the mimics. He learns more and more about how to fight back against them. Some really cool stuff. A lot of action. It was adapted into a big-budget Hollywood movie called Edge of Tomorrow, starring Tom Cruise and Emily Blunt. And it's a great movie. It's a really great movie. But it didn't do that well at the box office, if I remember. So it didn't get too popular. And when they released it on home media, they changed the name to Live, Die, Repeat, which is... It's a pretty fun tagline for a movie, but a really stupid title. I will say it is better than All You Need Is Kill. I don't know what that kind of garbled English is. But I think that's the only bad thing I can say about this book. The rest of it is awesome. There is a manga adaptation with art by Takeshi Obata, who is the artist for the Death Note series as well as One Punch Man. So if you like those series, you should definitely check out the manga version of this. I recommend both of them. The novel and the manga are both awesome. And number 5 is my favorite science fiction novel of all time. This is the book that got me into sci-fi. I really did not like the genre before this one. This really changed my opinion, kind of spun everything on its head. And that is Neuromancer by William Gibson. This book is a trip in every meaning of the word. I have read this book 3 times now, and I still do not fully know what's going on. I know that it's about a heist, and artificial intelligence, and cyberspace, and cyborgs with razor blades in their fingers, but I just don't have the mental capacity to put everything together and understand what this author is talking about all the time. I read this book and I don't know what's going on. I just know that it's really cool and I really enjoy it. William Gibson's prose is very weird, very quirky. He goes for a lot of far-out metaphors that don't always make sense, and sometimes you think he's going for a metaphor, but he's actually just describing something that's happening in a scene, and it's like, okay, that happened, that came out of nowhere, and it was really weird. But it's really enjoyable. If you've never read it before, and you're a big science fiction fan, I don't know why you'd put this off for so long. It will change the way you look at SF, because it changed the way I looked at SF. Then we have another childhood favorite. I knew I had to put one of the Chronicles of Narnia books on this list. And much like the Dresden Files, I didn't know which one to go with, because I love all of those books so much. They all mean so much to me, so very much to me. Big inspiration on me when I was a kid. But eventually I had to choose one. and that ended up being The Voyage of the Dawn Treader. So number 4 is The Voyage of the Dawn Treader by C.S. Lewis. I think some of Lewis's best fantasy writing is in this book. You have this very whimsical adventure, this island-hopping adventure, sailing to the end of the world. And it has two of, in my opinion, two of the best fantasy characters ever written. Right here on the cover, Sad Dragon Eustace and Reeby Cheap the Mouse Warrior. I love those characters so much. And the thing is, with this kind of book, it teaches you how to say goodbye to some of your favorite characters. It teaches you that the journey might go on, the adventure may continue, but sometimes your favorite characters have to step off. Sometimes your friends aren't going to be around for the whole adventure. And it was a hard lesson to learn as a kid, and it made me cry when I read this for the first time as a kid. But, it's so good. It's so wonderful and magical, and has some really, really great lessons to be learned. So, number 4, Voyage of the Dawn Treader, standing in for the entire Chronicles of Narnia series. I would have put it on this list if I could, but I couldn't. Had to show some restraint. If you've been on this channel for any length of time, you probably knew that Michael Moorcock was going to show up on this list, and he will, because I debated for a while whether I was going to put this book or The Fortress of the Pearl, which is my favorite Elric saga novel, at the number 3 spot. And I do love the Elric saga, but I think I love the Korum Chronicles series just a little bit more. And so I'm going to give the number 3 spot to The Knight of the Swords by Michael Moorcock. This is the first book of the Korum Chronicles series, the first book of the first trilogy, the Sword Rulers trilogy. I do have the first book of the second trilogy, which is The Bull and the Spear. This is the first book of the Silver Hand trilogy. And I want to read these soon, but I don't have the other 2 books, so I want to get the second and third book of that trilogy before I start reading them. Because I know for a fact, once I finish The Bull and the Spear, I'm going to want to read the other 2 books. So I want to line those all up before I start reading them. But as for the original trilogy, I don't want to say too much more, because again, I'm going to make a whole review about this series eventually. And I will say for now that I think it is a horribly underrated series. This has some just really cool, unique fantasy elements that I don't think I've seen in any other series. But it's incredibly underrated. There are more people than I originally thought that know about this series. Ever since I posted that Hawkmoon video, I've been getting tons of comments talking about Korum and how much people love Korum, which is fantastic. I'm really glad to hear that, but I still think this series is very underrated. So by all means, if you have a chance to pick up a copy of Knight of the Swords, please do. Please read the series. You will not regret it, I promise you. These last 2 books aren't just my 2 favorite books of all time. They are the books that inspired me the most as a writer. If you didn't know, I am a fantasy writer. I've written my own fantasy stories and published them independently for the past 4 years or so. And this book in particular has really shaped the way I look at the genre and the way that I want to write the genre. I have really fallen out of love with the idea of epic fantasy. You know, these big 1,000-page fantasy novels that take you a couple of months to finish. I've really fallen out of love with those, and I've really fallen in love with the idea of the pulps, of pulp fantasy, what you would call sword and sorcery or heroic fantasy, stuff that is a little more old-fashioned and is geared toward very fast-paced storytelling and very visceral action scenes. And the thing that really sparked that inspiration was when I first picked up this book, and again, if you've been around on the channel for any amount of time, you knew what was coming. You knew this guy was going to show up too. This is Robert E. Howard's Conan the Cimmerian, The Coming of Conan the Cimmerian. This is part of a 3-part series of books that Del Rey published. They collect all of the Conan stories as they were originally written by Robert E. Howard. This one right here has the first 13 stories, so it's fantastic. If I had to choose one Conan story as my favorite, I couldn't. It's a 3-way tie between The Tower of the Elephant, The Queen of the Black Coast, and The Scarlet Citadel. Those are my 3 favorite stories. I love them all equally, and they all appear in this book right here. So this book is pretty awesome. And when I read this for the first time, it blew my mind how fresh and how well-aged these stories were. They were written back in the 30s, but I think they've aged incredibly well. There are elements of them that are a little dated, but for the most part, the stories themselves are still very fresh, very exciting. And I had never read anything, or I hadn't read anything that had inspired my love of fantasy so much since I read my number 1 book, which, once again, it's a predictable pick. It's the most predictable, generic pick for anyone who's ever talked about fantasy on the internet, but I can't deny it is my favorite book of all time, and it's the book that made me want to be a fantasy writer. That's Lord of the Rings by J.R.R. Tolkien. Isn't it a trilogy? Isn't it 3 books? No, it is one big old book. That is the way the writer intended it to be, and so that's what it is. It is one big old book. This was before I fell out of love with epic fantasy. As far as I'm concerned, this is the only epic fantasy book that matters. This is the only fantasy book that I will bother to read 1,000 pages of, because it's just that good. The thing is, what can I say about Lord of the Rings that hasn't been said already? There are plenty of other people on YouTube who are much more articulate than me, who can express, the virtues of this book, why it is so great, how it's changed the fantasy genre forever. What I can say is that, like I said, this was the book that inspired me to be a fantasy writer. This book and The Hobbit, when I read these as a kid, it took me on an actual adventure. And by the time I finished it, I wanted to be able to recreate that. Not so much to copy the stories or anything, but to recreate that feeling in my own stories. I wanted people to be able to read something that I had written and have the same feeling that I had when I finished The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings for the first time. And that's been the goal ever since. And if you ever want to make me cry, you hold me down and you force me to read the last couple chapters of Lord of the Rings, because I will bawl like a baby, and the entire book, you'll have to wring it out like a washcloth, because it'll be so soaked through. But yeah, it's my favorite book of all time. I can't deny it, even though it's a very generic pick. But there it is. Those are my top 10 favorite books of all time. Again, let me know in the comments what are your guys' favorite. I will try to respond as often as I can, and check out what you guys have been reading and what you guys really love. Because I really am doing this to foster a community where we can just talk about what we love and why we love it so much, and share with everybody. So please comment below. Let me know what your favorite books are. Thank you again so much for 1,000 subscribers. It means so much to me. I hope you'll continue to check out the videos as I'm putting them out. And until next time, guys, farewell and keep reading.